The Woman He Brought Home. Series Intro. Before we begin, I need you to stop whatever you are doing. Put down the other tab, set aside the other story, close the other window. Because what you are about to watch is not a story about a woman who screams. It is not a story about a woman who throws letters into fires, who confronts her husband in hallways, who weeps into pillows and begs for explanations that will never satisfy. It is not that kind of story. This is the story of a woman who discovers the worst thing a person can discover about the person they love most, and goes completely, terrifyingly, beautifully quiet. This is the story of Vivian Ashcombe. And if you have ever underestimated a quiet woman, if you have ever mistaken stillness for surrender, if you have ever looked at a graceful, composed, a perfectly mannered lady sitting at the end of a dinner table and thought, she is harmless, then this series is going to teach you something you will not forget. Here is what The Quietest Revenge is about. It is set in Regency, England, a world of ballrooms and calling cards, of morning visits and evening assemblies, of reputations built over decades and destroyed over dinner. A world where a woman's primary currency is her social standing, and where the rules that govern that standing were written entirely by men who never intended them to protect the women living inside them. It is about betrayal. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet domestic kind that happens in your own house, wearing your husband's coat, sitting in chairs you chose, touching objects that belong to your life. It is about intelligence, the kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that sits behind careful eyes in a pleasant face at a crowded dinner table, watching, learning, filing, building. It is about power, specifically the power available to a woman who has been told she has none, once she decides to stop believing that. And it is about revenge, the coldest kind, the kind that requires patience instead of rage, the kind that looks, from the outside, exactly like Grace. 4 episodes, 1 extraordinary woman, 2 people who made the catastrophic mistake of underestimating her, and a social destruction so precise, so elegant, so completely invisible in its architecture, that by the time anyone understands what happened, it is already finished. The Quietest Revenge begins now. If this series already has you, if that description alone made something tighten in your chest, then do 3 things before we go any further. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Because this story deserves a witness. And so does Vivian Ashcombe. Now, let's begin. The dinner table at Ashcombe House seated 24. On the nights Lord Hector Castro Ashcombe entertained, which was most nights, because Castro understood that the most effective political work happened over good wine and better conversation, in rooms where men felt comfortable and women were decorative. All 24 seats were filled, the table dressed with the particular perfection that required an entire household staff working from 7 in the morning to achieve. Vivian had overseen every detail of it. The flowers, white roses and winter greenery, arranged in the silver epergne that had belonged to Castro's grandmother. The menu, 4 courses, carefully calibrated to the dietary preferences of the most important guests and the budget consciousness of a household whose master spent freely on appearance and carefully on everything else. The seating, a chess game in itself, placing the right people beside the right people, engineering the conversations that needed to happen while separating the personalities that would clash. She had done this for 6 years. She was very good at it. At the head of the table, Lord Castro held court with the ease of a man who had been born into rooms that arranged themselves around him. He was handsome. This was simply true, without sentiment. Dark-haired, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that made political speeches more convincing than their content warranted, and social gatherings more animated than their guest lists deserved. He laughed at the right moments. He listened with visible attention. He had the politician's gift of making every person in a conversation feel like the most important person in the room. Vivian sat at the opposite end of the table, as was proper, and watched him the way she had watched him for 6 years, with the fond, quiet admiration of a woman who loved her husband and knew it, who had built her life into the architecture of his ambitions without resentment, who found her own satisfaction in the smooth functioning of a household that allowed him to be everything he was trying to be. She had been, she would reflect later, a very good wife. Too good, or perhaps so thorough in her competence that she had made herself invisible. So graceful in her management that Castro had stopped seeing the management, had started experiencing the results as simply the natural state of things, the way people stop noticing the air they breathe until something removes it. The first sign, the first one she could name looking back, though there had been others she had chosen not to name, was the perfume. Not hers. She had noticed it 2 months ago on the collar of a coat she had picked up from the chair where Castro left things he expected to be removed without acknowledgement. A scent, floral, warmer than the perfume she wore, slightly too sweet for daytime, but designed, she thought, with the automatic analytical reflex she applied to everything, for evening, for enclosed spaces, for proximity. She had set the coat down. She had gone to the window and looked at the garden for a long time. Then she had called for the coat to be taken to the laundry and had not thought about it again. Or rather, she had not allowed herself to think about it. Which was different. She was beginning to understand that it was different. The late-night carriage rides had begun in September. Castro had always kept irregular hours. Parliament, political dinners, club meetings, the endless social machinery of a man building influence. She had never questioned his evenings because she had never had reason to, or because she had never given herself permission to, and she was no longer certain those two things were the same. But September had introduced a new pattern. Carriages called after midnight, from the private mews entrance rather than the front, hot quiet enough that she only knew because her bedroom window overlooked the back courtyard, and she had always been a light sleeper. He returned before dawn. He was unfailingly pleasant the following morning. He never explained. She had not asked. The hidden letters she had discovered by accident. His secretary had misrouted a household correspondence bundle, and among the legitimate estate papers, she found an envelope that was clearly personal. Cream paper, no return address, sealed with dark wax. She had not opened it. She had placed it on his desk with the other correspondence and said nothing. But she had noted the handwriting. Feminine, confident. Slanting slightly to the right with the unconscious flourish of someone who had been taught to write beautifully and knew it. 3 separate pieces of information, assembled over 2 months. Enough to build a picture she did not want to finish. She was, she told herself at the end of each day, probably wrong. She told herself this with the conviction of a woman who already knew she was right. At the dinner table, Castro was in the middle of a story about a parliamentary debate. One she had heard before, polished through repetition into its most entertaining version, when his eyes moved briefly to the door. Just briefly, just a flicker. The automatic orientation of a man toward something, or someone, he was expecting. Vivian watched the door. No one entered. She watched Castro's expression resettle into the dinner table performance, and she noted the slight quality of waiting in it, the alert patience of someone anticipating an arrival. She returned to her own conversation. Lord Westing, on her left, was making an observation about the opera season that deserved at least the appearance of engagement. and she filed what she had seen in the careful library of her mind. She was building a picture. She was almost finished. She arrived on a Tuesday. Not dramatically. Nothing about Agatha Morell's arrival at Ashcombe House was dramatic on the surface. No announcement, no ceremony, simply a carriage at the front entrance on a grey November morning, and Castro in the entrance hall with the expression of a man who had planned this and rehearsed how to present it. "Vivian," he said, when she came downstairs at the sound of arrival. "Allow me to introduce Miss Agatha Morell. She has been engaged to assist with the administrative correspondence for the Northern Estate campaign. Given the volume of work, I thought it most practical for her to be based here." Vivian looked at Agatha Morell. Agatha Morell was perhaps 25. She was beautiful in the way that requires effort and possesses the confidence of someone who has always been rewarded for it. Dark-eyed, finely dressed, with the posture of a woman who understood how she appeared and had made peace with using it. She smiled at Vivian with the polished warmth of a professional introduction. "Lady Ashcombe," she said, "what a beautiful home. You must be very proud of it." "Your home. You must be proud." The grammar of it, placing Vivian firmly in the role of the house's aesthetic steward rather than its mistress, was too precise to be accidental. Vivian heard it the way a musician hears a wrong note, instantly, entirely, without being able to explain the mechanism of recognition to someone without the same ear. "Miss Morell," Vivian said pleasantly, "welcome to Ashcombe House. I hope the journey was comfortable." "Perfectly comfortable, thank you." Agatha's eyes moved around the entrance hall with the assessing quality of someone measuring a space against its potential, rather than appreciating its current state. Castro was already directing the footman with Agatha's luggage. More luggage than a temporary work arrangement required, Vivian noted, the kind of luggage that assumed duration. "I thought the blue guest room," Castro said, to no one specifically. "Of course," Vivian said. "I'll have Mrs. Hartley prepare it." She went to find Mrs. Hartley. In the corridor, alone for 30 seconds, she allowed herself one moment, just one, of absolute, she's unmanaged feeling. It moved through her like cold water, top to bottom, the recognition of something she had been half knowing for 2 months, arriving as full knowledge. Then she composed her face and went to find the housekeeper. The days that followed established Agatha's particular method. It was subtle. Vivian would grant her that. She was not crude about it. She did not stake claim loudly or obviously. She did it the way Ivy does it, gradually, quietly, attaching to the surfaces of a structure without seeming to alter them until you looked closely and saw how completely she had changed what she was attached to. She sat beside Castro at the breakfast table. Not at the table exactly, because that would have been socially impossible, but in the chair nearest to his, with the papers she was supposedly organizing, in close enough proximity that the conversation between them was intimate rather than professional. She answered questions directed at Castro, not frequently enough to be obvious, but consistently enough to establish a pattern. A guest would ask about the Northern campaign, and before Castro could answer, Agatha's voice would arrive with the information. "I believe Lord Castro's position on the matter is—" She said it with such easy familiarity that the conversation moved on before the presumption of it could be remarked upon. She touched things. This was the one that required the most discipline on Vivian's part. The absent, proprietary way Agatha would lift a book from a side table and set it down elsewhere. The way her hand trailed along the back of a chair that had been in the Ashcombe family for 3 generations. The way she rearranged the flowers on the morning room mantelpiece with the casual authority of someone improving their own space. Each time, Vivian observed. Each time, she said nothing. Castro noticed her noticing. She could see it in the slight tension of his jaw when Agatha's presumptions were too visible. The brief flicker of something that was awareness without apology. And each time, the awareness resolved itself not into correction, but into distraction. A new topic introduced, a redirect, the practiced maneuver of a man managing a situation he preferred not to name. "You seem quiet tonight," he said one evening, after a dinner at which Agatha had twice addressed him by his given name in a room full of guests who were too polite to remark on it. "I am always quiet," Vivian replied. He accepted this, and he had no reason not to. It was true. She had always been quiet. He had simply never considered that quietness and stillness were different things, and that she had been, beneath the stillness, watching everything. The overheard conversation happened on a Thursday evening. Vivian had come downstairs for a book she had left in the library, a small domestic errand, the kind that filled the margins of a day. The library door was not fully closed. Inside, the fire was burning, and two voices were speaking in the register of people who believed themselves to be alone. Castro's voice, and Agatha's. She did not hear the words clearly. They were speaking too quietly, and she was too precise a person to press herself against the doorframe like a character in a melodrama. But she heard the tone, which was enough. The particular easiness of it, the laughter, Agatha's, at something Castro had said, the way Castro's voice responded, lower, with something in it she had not heard him direct at her in at least 2 years. And then, clearly, without lowering her voice because she felt no need to, Hector. Just the name, just his given name, spoken with the comfortable familiarity of someone who had long since stopped using the formal address. Hector. Vivian stood in the corridor for a moment. Then she turned and went back upstairs without the book. She had not set out to search. She wanted to be clear about that with herself. She had not gone looking with the deliberate intention of a suspicious wife conducting an investigation. She had gone to Castro's study to find an estate document she needed for correspondence with their solicitor. A practical errand. Entirely legitimate. But the study, when she entered it at the hour she had calculated Castro would be occupied with his afternoon appointment, had the particular quality of a room whose owner has been careless, papers not in their usual order. The desk drawer left slightly open. Castro was meticulous about the desk drawer, a small obsessive habit she had observed in him since their first year of marriage. She approached the desk because the document she needed was kept in the left-hand drawer, and the left-hand drawer was precisely the one that sat slightly open, and she was simply retrieving what she had come for. The receipts were not hidden exactly. They were folded inside a parliamentary briefing document, inserted, not secured. The inserting had been casual, the act of a man who did not believe his desk would ever be examined. She unfolded them. Jewellery, 3 pieces, purchased over 4 months from a jeweller in Bond Street, whose clientele was the kind who valued discretion. A sapphire bracelet, a garnet brooch, a locket with an engraving. The receipt listed only personal inscription, 6 words, and the cost. She looked at them for a long time. She refolded them, replaced them exactly as she had found them. She found her estate document in the left-hand drawer, as expected. She returned the drawer to its slightly open position. She was about to leave when she saw the letters. Not searching. She had not been searching. But they were there, in the space beside the bookshelf where Castro kept the document box she had given him as a wedding anniversary gift, and the box was slightly displaced, and the ribbon, black satin, it tied in a careful bow, was visible between the box and the shelf. She should not have looked. She looked. There were 9 letters. She did not read all of them. She read the one on top, the most recent, judging by the date. And then she read the one at the bottom, and then she stopped. Not because the others would have told her more than these two had. They would not have. She had enough information. She had had enough information for 2 months, and what the letters gave her was not information so much as confirmation. The first letter was unremarkable in its particulars and devastating in its specifics, in the way that intimate correspondence always is. The evidence of a world that exists without you, in which two people have developed a private language, private references, a private history that belongs entirely to the space you do not occupy. The last letter, the one at the bottom, the earliest, was shorter. She read it once. "Soon I shall no longer hide in your wife's shadow. You have promised me. Do not make me wait much longer, Hector. I am not a patient woman." Vivian set the letter down carefully. The fire in the study grate was burning. The clock on the mantelpiece marked the half-hour. Somewhere in the house, a door closed and footsteps crossed the floor above, and the ordinary sounds of an occupied household continued without any awareness of the woman standing in the study, holding a letter that had just rearranged everything. She stood very still. Something moved through her. She would not call it grief, not then, though that was what it was. In the moment, it felt more physical than emotional, more like a sudden change in pressure than a feeling, the sensation of something that had been holding a shape collapsing inward. 6 years of marriage, 6 years of dinners and managed households and political calculations made easier by her competence. 6 years of quietness that she had given him freely, out of love, because she had believed. She had genuinely, completely believed that he saw her, that beneath the social function of their partnership, beneath the practical architecture of the thing they had built together, there was something real. She had been, it seemed, quite wrong. The grief lasted perhaps 40 seconds. Then something else arrived, quieter than grief, colder. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. One pass, deliberate, final. She retied the letters with their black ribbon. She replaced them exactly where she had found them, at the precise angle of the original displacement. She picked up her estate document, and she left the study with the composed expression of a woman who has just retrieved the correspondence she came for. Abigail Whitmore's morning room was the one place in London where Vivian had always been able to be entirely herself. This had been true since they were 17. Since the season they had come out together and discovered in each other that rare thing. A friend who required no performance, who could be trusted with the unedited version of your thoughts. Abigail expected tears. Vivian could see it in the way her friend had arranged the room, the tea already poured, and the biscuits set out with the particular care that signals someone has prepared for a difficult conversation. The chair pulled close to the fire, because people who are about to cry benefit from warmth. Vivian sat down, accepted the tea, did not cry. Abigail watched her with the increasing concern of a person whose preparations have been based on a misreading of the situation. "Tell me," Abigail said. Vivian told her. Not everything. Not the letters exactly. Not the full inventory of the past 2 months. But enough. She told it in her own voice, which was level and precise, and carried the particular quality of a woman who has made a private decision and is now informing a trusted ally rather than seeking comfort. When she finished, Abigail was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" Abigail asked. "Not what will you do?" The careful question of a woman who understood that Vivian's wants were the beginning rather than the conclusion. "I want," Vivian said slowly, "to be clear about what I am not going to do. I am not going to confront him. I am not going to weep in a corridor or throw letters on fires or make any of the scenes that would allow him to manage me as a problem he can solve with an explanation and a promise." "And what are you going to do?" Vivian set down her teacup. When she looked up, Abigail saw something in her expression that she had not seen there before, not in 17 years of friendship. A quality she did not immediately have a word for. She found one eventually: precision. If a man wishes to destroy his home, Vivian said, perhaps one should simply hand him the match. The room was very quiet, and Abigail set down her own cup. Vivian? He has made his choices, Vivian said pleasantly, as though discussing a menu. I intend to allow the consequences of those choices to become completely, thoroughly, and publicly apparent, without lifting a visible finger. That sounds elegant, Vivian supplied. It sounds elegant. That is rather the point. Abigail looked at her oldest friend for a long moment. Then, with the slow exhale of a woman boarding a ship whose destination she understands may be complicated. What do you need from me? Vivian smiled. Not the dinner table smile, not the social performance. The real one, the rare one. Your ears, she said. And your mouth, applied with precision, at the right moments, in the right company. Society gossip as ammunition. Society gossip as architecture, Vivian corrected. Ammunition implies bluntness. I prefer something more structural. Abigail picked up her tea. God help them, she said, with genuine feeling. He will not, Vivian said serenely. He has far better things to attend to. She returned to Ashcombe House in the late afternoon, when the light was going grey and the street lamps were beginning to be lit, and London was settling into its evening self. Castro was in the drawing room with Agatha, nominally reviewing correspondence, actually in the particular proximity of two people who are pretending to work and succeeding only at proximity. They separated with the slight over-casualness of people adjusting for an audience when Vivian entered. She observed this without expression. Castro, she said pleasantly, and Miss Morell. I hope the day's work has been productive. Quite, Castro said. Excellent. Vivian set down her gloves and her reticule with the composed efficiency of a woman returning to her house. Her house. Miss Morell, I have been thinking about your situation here. The guest room is comfortable enough, I hope, but the arrangement does seem slightly impractical for someone with a significant volume of work. Agatha looked at her with the careful attention of someone trying to read an expression that is giving nothing away. It's perfectly fine. I was thinking, Vivian continued, that the East Wing rooms would suit you far better. More space, better light, closer to the study where you work. She smiled, warm, gracious, entirely transparent in its surface and entirely opaque in everything below it. I insist. Consider Ashcombe House your home for as long as your work here requires. The silence that followed lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Agatha's smile returned. The victory smile. The smile of a woman who believes she has just been handed something she wanted. That is incredibly gracious of you, Lady Ashcombe. Not at all, Vivian said. We must all make the best of our circumstances. She excused herself and went to her own rooms. At the fireplace she stood for a moment. In her hand was a single document, a financial paper, one Castro would not miss immediately, one whose absence would not be felt for perhaps a week. Long enough. She had chosen it carefully. She held it to the flame. The paper caught at the corner, orange and then black, the edges curling inward with the quiet efficiency of destruction. She watched it burn. Behind her, Ashcombe House continued its evening. Castro, somewhere in the drawing room, Agatha settling into the East Wing, servants managing the invisible machinery of a household that ran because she made it run. In front of her, the fire consumed the document completely. She set the last corner in the grate and watched it finish. Then she straightened. smoothed her dress, looked at herself in the mirror above the mantelpiece, composed, clear-eyed, perfectly still. "All right," she said quietly to the woman in the mirror. "Let us begin." Character quotes of the episode. She cried once, 40 seconds, in a study that smelled of his cologne and her 6 years of loyalty. Then she wiped her eyes and walked out with her head straight and her plan already forming. She gave her grief exactly as much time as it deserved, not 1 second more. Narrator. I have spent 6 years making his life beautiful. I find I am quite ready to apply those same skills to a different project. Vivian Ashcombe. If a man wishes to destroy his home, perhaps one should simply hand him the match. Vivian Ashcombe to Abigail. She invited me to stay. She smiled and insisted and called the house my home. And I smiled back. God help me, I smiled back. And only later, lying in the East Wing room she had arranged for me so graciously, did I feel the first whisper of something I could not name. Not gratitude. Something colder than that. Agatha Morell. Vivian has always been the quietest person in every room she enters. I used to think that was simply her nature. I understand now that it was her strategy. She was not being quiet. She was listening. Abigail Whitmore. Vivian Ashcombe discovered the worst thing a wife can discover. She did not scream. She did not confront. She did not fall apart. She invited the woman into her house, smiled with genuine warmth, and burned a document in her fireplace while the East Wing settled into occupation. The war has begun. Agatha believes she has won the opening move. She has never been more wrong in her life. If Vivian already has you, if that final fireplace scene made you feel something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite triumph, but lived exactly in the border between them, then you already understand what kind of series this is going to be. No screaming, no confrontations, no dramatic hallway accusations. Just a woman with a brilliant mind, a long memory, and the patience of someone who has decided that losing her composure is the one luxury she cannot afford. Episode 2 is called The Art of Quiet Cruelty, and Vivian is just getting started. The manipulation begins, the seeds of suspicion are planted, and a certain widowed duke is about to walk into a ballroom and change everything. Not because Vivian loses her head over him, but because she realizes, with characteristic precision, exactly how useful his admiration can be. But first, we need to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. And if you are not subscribed yet, this is the moment. Because the woman who just burned that document in her fireplace is only getting started, and you do not want to miss what comes next. Comment next episode when you're ready. The quietest revenge is the one you never see coming. You haven't seen anything yet,